Two people can walk into the same gym. They can perform the same exercises, eat similar foods, train with the same intensity, and follow the same routine for years, yet eventually walk out looking completely different. One may develop broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and a dramatic V-taper. Another may become thick, dense, and powerful, with enormous legs, a strong back, and a compact torso. Another may remain relatively light, but become extremely lean, athletic, and defined. And another may build a physique that looks almost effortless, with moderate muscle, low body fat, good posture, and visible athleticism without anything appearing exaggerated. These differences raise an interesting question. If training is supposed to build muscle, why doesn't everyone who trains end up looking the same? The answer begins with something we cannot choose: genetics. But it does not end there. The human body is not a fixed sculpture. It is a biological system. It adapts to stress, responds to training, changes according to nutrition and recovery, and reflects the demands that we repeatedly place upon it. Perhaps most importantly, it changes according to the decisions we make consistently over time. That is the central idea of this documentary. There is no single perfect physique, and there is no universal body that everyone should try to copy. Instead, there are different physiques, different goals, different genetic starting points, and different ways to train. The real question is not whether you can look exactly like another person. You cannot. The better question is what kind of physique you can build from the body you have, and how intelligently you can guide that body toward the outcome you want. Before we talk about muscle, we need to talk about the framework underneath it. Your skeleton provides the architecture on which your physique is built. Shoulder width, clavicle length, pelvic width, ribcage dimensions, torso length, femur length, tibia length, and arm length can all influence how your muscles eventually appear. Imagine two buildings constructed from similar materials, but with completely different foundations and proportions. Even if the same amount of material is added to both, they will not look identical. Human physiques work in much the same way. A person with relatively long clavicles may naturally create the visual impression of broader shoulders. Someone with a relatively narrow pelvis may have a stronger waist-to-shoulder contrast. Someone with a long torso may distribute muscle differently from someone with a short torso. A person with long femurs may experience squatting movements differently from someone with shorter femurs. None of these characteristics mean that one body is better than another. They simply mean that every person begins with a different structure. This is one of the most important concepts to understand when pursuing a physique. You are not building on a blank canvas. You are building on an existing biological framework. That framework influences the final appearance, but it does not eliminate your ability to improve. It simply means that the most intelligent approach is to understand your structure and work with it, rather than constantly comparing yourself with somebody who has completely different proportions. Genetics are often discussed in fitness as if they were a simple switch. Either you have good genetics or you do not. Reality is much more complicated. Genetics influence a huge number of characteristics related to physique, including skeletal structure, muscle fiber characteristics, tendon properties, muscle insertions, muscle belly length, hormonal responses, energy expenditure, appetite, fat distribution, recovery, and potentially the magnitude of your response to resistance training. But genetics do not simply determine whether you can build muscle. They influence the range of outcomes available to you and the speed at which you may reach them. Think of genetics as part of the map rather than the entire journey. Two people may begin at different points and have different roads available to them, but both can move forward. The mistake is believing that because someone else has a better starting position for a particular visual outcome, your own effort becomes meaningless. It does not. Genetics influence potential. Training creates a stimulus. Nutrition provides energy and raw materials. Recovery allows adaptation. And consistency gives the body enough repeated exposure to change. Time then reveals the accumulation of those changes. This is why physique development should be measured over months and years rather than days. A single workout does not transform you. One meal does not transform you. One night of sleep does not transform you. But thousands of workouts, thousands of meals, and thousands of nights of recovery can completely change how your body looks and performs. When people say they want a better physique, they often reduce the entire concept to muscle. But muscle alone does not determine appearance. Shape matters. Proportion matters. Symmetry matters. Muscle distribution matters. Body fat levels matter. Posture matters. Even the way you stand can dramatically change how your physique is perceived. Consider two people with similar amounts of muscle. One has highly developed shoulders and upper back, but comparatively smaller legs. Another has enormous legs and a thick torso, but less upper body width. Both may be muscular, yet they represent completely different physiques. This is why bodybuilding, powerlifting, endurance sports, calisthenics, and general fitness can create very different bodies. Bodybuilding emphasizes muscular development and proportion. Powerlifting prioritizes performance in specific lifts. Olympic weightlifting emphasizes explosive strength and technical efficiency. Endurance sports prioritize the ability to sustain movement for long periods. Calisthenics emphasizes relative strength and body control. Different demands create different adaptations. Therefore, the question should not simply be, how do I build muscle? A better question is, what kind of physique am I trying to build? Once you answer that question, your training strategy becomes much clearer. One of the most recognizable physiques is the lean athletic physique. This body is characterized by visible muscle, relatively low body fat, good conditioning, strong posture, and an overall impression of physical capability. It does not necessarily involve extreme muscularity. Instead, the emphasis is usually on balance. The shoulders are developed, the back is visible, the chest has shape, the arms show definition, the waist remains relatively lean, and the legs are developed enough to create overall balance. This physique can often be built through a combination of resistance training and cardiovascular activity. A person might train with weights several times per week while also walking regularly, performing conditioning sessions, or participating in a sport. Nutrition plays a major role because definition is strongly influenced by body fat levels. Someone can possess substantial muscle, but appear relatively smooth if body fat is higher, while another person with less muscle may appear dramatically defined because they are leaner. This creates one of the biggest illusions in fitness. People often mistake leanness for muscularity. Definition is not the same thing as muscle mass. A visible six-pack does not automatically mean that someone has more muscle than a person without visible abdominal definition. For the lean athletic look, the goal is generally to build enough muscle in the right places while maintaining a body composition that allows that muscle to be visible. The result is not necessarily the biggest body in the gym. It is a body that looks capable, balanced, and conditioned. Another highly sought-after physique is the classic V-taper. Broad shoulders, a developed upper back, and a relatively narrow waist create the visual shape of an inverted triangle. The V-taper is influenced partly by genetics, especially skeletal proportions, but it can also be developed through intelligent training. The shoulders and back can be built through resistance training, while the appearance of the waist is influenced strongly by body fat levels and skeletal structure. You cannot exercise your way into a completely different pelvis or clavicle structure, but you can develop the muscles that create greater width above the waist. The lateral deltoids can make the shoulders appear broader, while the lats can contribute significantly to back width. Upper back development adds thickness and structure, and maintaining a healthy body composition can preserve waist definition. This is why someone pursuing a V-taper may prioritize movements such as lateral raises, overhead presses, pull-ups, pull-downs, rows, and other exercises that develop the shoulder girdle and back. But exercise selection alone is not enough. Technique matters. If a movement is intended to emphasize a specific muscle, simply moving a heavy weight is not necessarily the objective. The target muscle needs to experience meaningful mechanical tension. This is one reason ego lifting can be counterproductive. A person may use an enormous weight but shift much of the workload toward other muscles or momentum. Progressive overload matters, but progressive overload does not mean adding weight to every exercise every week, regardless of technique. It can mean more repetitions, better technique, greater range of motion, more load, more productive volume, or improved performance at the same load. The goal is to create a progressively challenging stimulus that the body can recover from. Now imagine a completely different physique. Thick traps, dense upper back, heavy legs, strong hips, a powerful torso, and an overall impression of mass and strength. This is the thick and powerful physique often associated with strength athletes, powerlifters, strongmen, wrestlers, and athletes whose sports reward force production. The visual emphasis is different from the V-taper. Instead of maximizing visual width and creating the illusion of a narrow waist, the body often appears solid, dense, and powerful. Training for this type of physique tends to emphasize compound movements such as squats, deadlifts, presses, rows, carries, and their variations. The objective is often to develop the muscular and technical qualities necessary to produce substantial force. However, getting strong does not automatically mean becoming maximally muscular. Because strength depends on several factors including muscle size, neural adaptations, technique, leverage, coordination, and skill. A highly skilled lifter may move enormous weights without having the exact appearance of a professional bodybuilder. Conversely, a bodybuilder may possess extraordinary muscularity without being optimized for a 1 repetition maximum. Different training goals produce different adaptations. The thick and powerful physique represents a philosophy centered more heavily around strength, robustness, and performance. Then there is the bodybuilder physique, where muscular development and proportion become central objectives. A bodybuilder does not simply ask whether a muscle is strong. They ask whether it is sufficiently developed, whether it balances the rest of the body, whether it contributes to symmetry, whether it improves the silhouette, and whether it creates separation and visual detail. This is why bodybuilding programs can contain many exercises, and why different movements may be used to train different aspects of the same muscle group. The chest, back, shoulders, arms, legs, and even smaller muscle groups can all be trained with considerable attention to detail. A bodybuilder might dedicate an entire session to a particular region because the goal is not general fitness. The goal is to create a highly specific visual outcome. But this is exactly why beginners should not automatically copy professional bodybuilding programs. A professional athlete may have spent a decade or more building their capacity for high training volumes. Their program is designed around a specialized objective. A beginner usually needs something much simpler: a consistent stimulus, good technique, progressive overload, adequate recovery, and enough time to adapt. More exercises do not automatically mean more results. Better training produces better results. Calisthenics creates another distinctive physique. Imagine removing the machines and barbells and using the body itself as the primary source of resistance. Pull-ups, push-ups, dips, rows, handstands. Muscle-ups, squats, lunges, leg raises, levers, and other movements can develop impressive levels of strength and muscularity. The resulting physique may feature strong shoulders and arms, a developed back, visible abdominal musculature, and relatively low body fat. But perhaps the most interesting characteristic is relative strength. Relative strength describes how strong a person is in relation to their body weight. A person who can perform difficult movements using their own body has developed a unique combination of strength, coordination, stability, balance, and body control. The challenge is not simply to move a heavy external object. The challenge is to control your own body through space. This creates a different relationship with training. Instead of asking how much weight you can lift, you may ask whether you can control a more difficult movement. A basic push-up becomes easy, then a harder variation becomes the challenge. A pull-up becomes possible, then weighted pull-ups, explosive variations, or advanced bodyweight skills become the next target. Calisthenics demonstrates another important principle. Strength is specific. Being able to bench press a heavy barbell does not automatically mean you can perform a handstand push-up. And being able to squat heavily does not automatically mean you can execute a controlled pistol squat. The nervous system must learn the movement. The muscles must coordinate, the joints must stabilize, and the athlete must develop the skill. Endurance athletes provide another fascinating example of how training shapes the human body. Distance runners often look different from sprinters. Cyclists can look different from swimmers. Swimmers can look different from gymnasts. Endurance training places a premium on efficiency. The athlete must repeatedly produce movement over long periods, and carrying unnecessary body mass can be metabolically expensive in many endurance contexts. As a result, elite endurance athletes often develop physiques that emphasize efficiency rather than maximal muscularity. But this does not mean endurance athletes are weak. Their bodies may possess extraordinary cardiovascular capacity, highly adapted muscles, excellent fatigue resistance, and exceptional ability to sustain effort. Their strength lies in a different quality. This reminds us that a physique must always be interpreted within context. A person may look small compared with a bodybuilder while possessing extraordinary athletic ability. Visual size tells only part of the story. Fitness is multidimensional. Strength, power, speed, endurance, mobility, coordination, balance, body composition, and recovery all represent different qualities. No single physique maximizes all of these characteristics simultaneously. There are trade-offs, and understanding those trade-offs helps you choose realistic goals. Now move from endurance to explosive performance and imagine the physique of a sprinter. Powerful thighs, developed glutes, strong calves, athletic shoulders, a muscular torso, and relatively low body fat create an appearance built around speed and force. Sprinting requires the athlete to produce large amounts of force in extremely short periods. That means the athlete needs muscular power, coordination, technical efficiency, and the ability to accelerate rapidly. Resistance training can support this development, but sprinting itself remains highly specific. The physique emerges from the combination of the sport and the supporting training. This reveals a principle that applies across almost every athletic discipline. The body adapts to what you repeatedly ask it to do. If you repeatedly run long distances, you adapt toward endurance. If you repeatedly lift heavy weights, you adapt toward strength. If you repeatedly sprint, jump, and accelerate, you adapt toward power. If you repeatedly perform resistance training designed for hypertrophy, you adapt toward increased muscle size. The body is remarkably responsive, but it is also remarkably specific. Body fat is another major part of the visual equation. Muscle is only one side of physique appearance. Subcutaneous fat changes how muscle is displayed. Imagine a muscular arm covered by a higher layer of body fat. The arm may be large, but have little visible separation. Now imagine a smaller arm at a lower level of body fat. It may appear significantly more defined. This is why photographs can be deceptive. Lighting, camera angle, muscle pump, hydration, posture, and body fat levels can dramatically alter appearance. Social media magnifies this effect because people frequently compare their normal, relaxed appearance with someone else's carefully selected photograph. That photograph may have been taken after a workout, under controlled lighting, at a flattering angle, during a period of low body fat, and with deliberate posing. The comparison is not equal. This is why physique progress is better measured through consistent conditions. Take photographs under similar lighting and posture. Track body weight when appropriate. Consider circumference measurements. Record strength and performance. Look at the trend rather than a single day. Your body fluctuates constantly, so the goal is to identify long-term changes rather than react emotionally to temporary changes. Muscle insertions are another reason physiques differ. Muscles attach to bones through tendons, and the relative structure and attachment locations influence how muscles look. Two people with similar amounts of muscle can therefore have different visual shapes. The biceps provide an easy example. Some people have a fuller-looking biceps belly, while others have a longer-looking muscle shape. Neither person can simply perform more curls and completely transform one anatomical structure into another. Training can increase muscle size, but it cannot completely redesign attachment points. This is important because fitness culture can create unrealistic expectations. Someone sees a physique online and assumes that enough training will eventually make their own muscles look exactly the same. But anatomy places limits on the final shape. The smarter question is not, how can I become genetically identical to this person? It is, how can I maximize the physique available to me? The first question can lead to frustration. The second creates a strategy for progress. If your goal is muscle growth, the conversation eventually comes to hypertrophy. Resistance training creates a stimulus that can lead to muscle adaptation. Mechanical tension is an important part of that process. But muscle growth is not simply about lifting the heaviest possible weight. A wide range of resistance loads can contribute to hypertrophy when training is sufficiently challenging and performed with appropriate technique and volume. This is why the best hypertrophy program is not necessarily the program containing the heaviest weights. It is the program that allows you to train the target muscles effectively, recover, and progressively improve. Training close enough to muscular failure can be useful, but every set does not have to be taken to absolute failure. Fatigue has a cost. If every set is maximal, performance on later sets can suffer, recovery can become more difficult, and overall training quality may decline. The goal is to provide enough stimulus to create adaptation without creating unnecessary fatigue. This is one of the central balancing acts of training: stimulus versus recovery, work versus fatigue, progress versus sustainability. More is not always better. The best amount is the amount that produces progress and can be recovered from consistently. Progressive overload is another foundational principle. The body adapts to repeated stress. A weight that once felt extremely heavy can eventually feel normal. A number of repetitions that once exhausted you can become manageable. A workout that once caused severe fatigue can eventually become familiar. That adaptation is exactly what we want, but it creates a problem. If the training stimulus never changes, progress can eventually slow. Progressive overload solves this by gradually increasing the demands placed upon the body. You might add weight, perform more repetitions, improve technique, increase training volume, use a larger range of motion, or improve performance at the same load. The exact method can vary. What matters is that the body is eventually asked to do more than it has previously adapted to. But overload should not become an excuse for reckless progression. If you add weight while your technique completely collapses, you may not actually be moving toward the desired adaptation. If you add volume endlessly, fatigue may accumulate faster than useful stimulus. If you never challenge yourself, adaptation may stall. The sweet spot lies between complacency and chaos. Training frequency is another variable that people often overcomplicate. How often should you train a muscle? There is no single answer that applies perfectly to every person. Muscle growth depends on total productive training volume, effort, exercise selection, recovery, and individual response. Some people prefer training a muscle once per week. Others distribute training across several sessions. Frequency can be useful because it allows training volume to be spread across the week. Instead of performing a very large number of sets for one muscle during one session, you can distribute them across multiple sessions and potentially maintain better performance. But frequency itself is not magical. A person who can consistently train 4 days per week and progress may not need 6 days. Another person may prefer shorter, more frequent sessions. The best schedule is the one that fits your life and allows you to recover. Adherence beats theoretical perfection. A simple program followed consistently for years will generally produce better results than a theoretically perfect program that is abandoned after 3 weeks. The same principle applies to repetition ranges. Fitness culture has spent decades arguing about the perfect number of repetitions. 5, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20. But hypertrophy is not confined to one magical number. Different repetition ranges can contribute to muscle growth when sets are sufficiently challenging. Lower repetitions allow heavier loads. Moderate repetitions often provide a useful balance between load and fatigue. And higher repetitions can also stimulate growth, although they may become uncomfortable because of metabolic fatigue. The practical lesson is to choose repetition ranges that allow you to train effectively, safely, and progressively. Compound movements may often work well with moderate or lower repetitions, while isolation movements may be more comfortable with moderate or higher repetitions. But these are guidelines rather than laws. The human body does not read the number written in your training log. It responds to the stimulus. Nutrition provides the raw materials for the process. Training supplies the signal, but the body also needs energy and nutrients to maintain tissue, recover, and adapt. Protein is especially important because it supplies amino acids required for tissue maintenance and muscle protein synthesis. But protein is not the entire story. Total energy intake matters. Carbohydrates can support training performance. Dietary fats are important for normal physiological functions. Micronutrients support countless biological processes. Hydration influences performance. Overall dietary quality matters for health. If your goal is to gain substantial muscle, adequate energy intake can make the process easier. If your goal is to reduce body fat, an appropriate energy deficit is generally necessary. This is why physique development may involve different phases. A person might spend a period emphasizing muscle gain, another period emphasizing fat loss, and another period maintaining the new physique. The exact strategy depends on the individual and their starting point. But the underlying principle remains the same. Body composition is strongly influenced by energy balance, while muscle development is supported by adequate protein and resistance training. Protein deserves particular attention because it provides the amino acids needed to build and maintain body tissues. For people who perform resistance training, consuming adequate protein is especially relevant. But once adequate intake is reached, simply consuming more and more protein does not create unlimited muscle growth. There are diminishing returns. This is another example of the broader principle that more is not automatically better. The supplement industry sometimes makes fitness appear extremely complicated, but the foundation remains surprisingly simple. Adequate protein, appropriate energy intake, a nutrient-rich diet, progressive resistance training, sufficient sleep, and consistency do most of the heavy lifting. Supplements can sometimes provide convenience. Protein powder can make it easier to reach protein targets. Creatine monohydrate has strong evidence supporting its usefulness for improving strength and high-intensity exercise performance. But supplements should supplement the foundation rather than replace it. Sleep is the invisible part of training. You can train hard, eat well, follow a carefully designed program, and still limit your progress if you consistently sleep poorly. Sleep affects performance, mood, appetite regulation, recovery, and overall functioning. Training is essentially a signal telling your body that it needs to adapt. Recovery is the period during which the body responds to that demand. You do not become stronger simply because you lifted a heavy weight. You become stronger because your body adapts to the challenge afterward. This is why sleep should not be treated as an optional luxury. It is part of the training process. Professional athletes understand this because they know that recovery directly influences performance. The average person should understand it for the same reason. You do not necessarily need an expensive supplement stack or an advanced training facility. Sometimes the most productive improvement is simply creating a consistent sleep routine. Stress also influences the process. Physical training is one stressor, but life contains many others. Work, education, relationships, financial pressure, travel, poor sleep, emotional stress, and other responsibilities all consume recovery resources. Your body does not operate in separate compartments, where gym stress is completely isolated from everything else. If life becomes extremely stressful, your capacity to tolerate training may temporarily decrease. This does not mean abandoning exercise. It means adjusting intelligently. Sometimes the right workout is a hard session. Sometimes the right workout is a lighter session. Sometimes the right decision is recovery. A rigid program assumes that the body will always have the same capacity. Real life does not work that way. Successful training is flexible enough to survive real life. The importance of choosing a goal becomes even clearer when we compare different people. Imagine 4 individuals. The first wants to become as muscular as possible. The second wants to become stronger. The third wants to run a marathon. The fourth wants to look athletic and feel healthy. All 4 can enter the same gym, but their programs should not be identical. The bodybuilder needs hypertrophy-focused resistance training. The strength athlete needs technical practice with heavy resistance. The marathon runner needs extensive endurance training. The general fitness enthusiast needs a balanced combination of strength, conditioning, mobility, and sustainable nutrition. Yet social media often encourages everyone to train as though they have exactly the same goal. One program becomes the universal solution, then another replaces it. The reality is less exciting, but more useful. The best training depends on what you are trying to accomplish. At some point, physique development becomes a psychological decision. You stop asking what your body can become in theory and begin deciding what you actually want it to become. Maybe you want larger shoulders. Maybe you want stronger legs. Maybe you want visible abdominal definition. Maybe you want to improve posture. Maybe you want to feel more confident wearing certain clothes. Maybe you want to compete in a sport. Maybe you simply want to age with strength and mobility. Your reason matters because motivation based entirely on comparison is fragile. Someone will always be bigger. Someone will always be leaner. Someone will always be stronger. Someone will always have different genetics. If your happiness depends on outperforming everyone else, you have created an impossible game. A healthier approach is to compare trajectories. Where were you 1 year ago? How much stronger are you? How much better is your technique? How much muscle have you developed? How has your conditioning changed? How do you feel? These questions create a much more meaningful measurement system. Your competition becomes your previous self. Beginners should also understand that professional physiques are not beginner physiques. Elite athletes often spend many years building their training capacity. They may train 5 or 6 days per week, perform large amounts of volume, follow highly structured nutrition, and dedicate much of their lives to physical development. Beginners sometimes attempt to copy these routines immediately. They perform dozens of exercises, train constantly, use advanced techniques, and become exhausted. Then they conclude that training does not work. The problem was not training. The problem was trying to use an advanced strategy without an advanced foundation. Beginners need competence more than complexity. Learn how to squat. Learn how to hinge. Learn how to press. Learn how to pull. Learn how to brace. Learn how to control a movement. Learn how to progress. Learn how to recover. Learn how to eat consistently. Then repeat. The first year can be remarkably productive, precisely because the body has so much room to adapt. One of the biggest obstacles during the first year is constantly changing programs. One week someone follows a bodybuilding routine. The next week they discover powerlifting. Then they try calisthenics. Then high-intensity conditioning. Then a celebrity workout. Then a routine from a social media influencer. Each program is abandoned before enough time passes to evaluate it. Training should be treated as an ongoing experiment. Apply a stimulus, track performance, observe recovery, and adjust when necessary. If your lifts are improving and you feel good, there may be little reason to change. If your performance is declining and fatigue is increasing, something may need adjustment. If your body composition is not moving toward your goal, nutrition may need to change. A training journal turns vague impressions into useful data. Instead of saying, "I think I'm getting stronger," you can look at your numbers. Instead of saying, "I think my shoulders are growing," you can compare photographs taken under consistent conditions. Data does not provide every answer, but it creates better questions. Eventually, almost everyone encounters a plateau. At first, nearly everything works. Strength increases quickly. New exercises create noticeable adaptations. Then progress slows. The same weights become familiar. The same workouts produce less change. This is normal because the body adapts. The solution is not always to train harder. Sometimes it is to train smarter. A plateau can result from insufficient stimulus, but it can also result from excessive fatigue. Imagine one person whose workouts are always easy. They rarely challenge themselves and never approach meaningful effort. Their progress may have stalled because the stimulus is insufficient. Now imagine another person who trains relentlessly. Every set is maximal. Every workout is exhausting. Sleep is poor, and performance is declining. Their progress may have stalled because recovery cannot support the training load. Both people have plateaus, but their solutions are completely different. One may need more stimulus. The other may need more recovery. This is why training should be based on observation rather than ego. Cardiovascular exercise is another area where fitness culture often creates unnecessary conflict. Some people treat cardio as the enemy of muscle growth. It is not. Cardiovascular fitness is important for health, work capacity, and physical performance. The heart and circulatory system are central to your ability to sustain activity. The concern arises when excessive endurance training interferes with recovery, energy availability, or resistance training performance. But moderate cardiovascular exercise can coexist with muscle-building goals. Walking is particularly useful because it can increase daily activity without creating the same recovery demands as intense endurance sessions. Cycling, swimming, jogging, and other forms of cardio can also be used depending on your goals and preferences. If your goal is maximum hypertrophy, resistance training should remain a major priority. If your goal is general health, combining resistance training and cardiovascular exercise can be extremely valuable. Again, the goal determines the strategy. Physique is also influenced by posture and presentation. Two people with similar muscular development can appear different because of how they hold themselves. Shoulder position, spinal alignment, pelvic position, movement habits, and general body language can all influence appearance. But posture is more complex than simply being told to stand straight. The human body is dynamic. It moves, breathes, stabilizes, and adapts. Improving strength and movement quality can support better control, but the ultimate goal should not be to create a rigid pose. It should be to develop a body that moves well and feels capable. This leads to the larger distinction between aesthetics and function. The two do not have to be enemies. You can train for appearance while also becoming stronger and more capable. But you cannot maximize every physical quality simultaneously. If you want maximum muscle mass, your training will emphasize hypertrophy. If you want maximum marathon performance, your training will emphasize endurance. If you want maximum powerlifting strength, your training will emphasize strength and technical skill. Every training program is essentially a statement about what matters most. Exercise selection should therefore begin with the goal, rather than with whatever exercise happens to be popular. There are thousands of exercises, but you do not need thousands. A balanced program can be built around fundamental movement patterns, such as a squat variation, a hinge variation, a horizontal press, a vertical press, a horizontal pull, and a vertical pull. Additional exercises can then be added based on individual needs and priorities. If your shoulders are a weakness, emphasize them. If your legs are underdeveloped, give them greater attention. If your back lacks width, train the muscles responsible for that appearance. If your cardiovascular fitness is poor, introduce appropriate conditioning. The best exercise is often the one you can perform consistently, safely, with good technique, and progressively over time. It does not need to be complicated. Simple movements performed extremely well can create extraordinary results. You may also hear about the mind-muscle connection. This refers to consciously focusing on the target muscle during an exercise. For some people, this can improve movement control and help them feel the intended muscle working. But it should not become mystical. Muscle growth does not require visualization rituals. The fundamental drivers remain appropriate resistance training, progressive overload, adequate nutrition, and recovery. The practical value of focused attention is that it can improve technique. If your goal is to train your back, but every repetition becomes a full body swing, the movement may not produce the stimulus you intended. Control, stability, range of motion, and movement intent can all improve training quality. Ego lifting represents the opposite approach. The number on the bar becomes an identity. A heavier weight feels like proof of progress. Sometimes it is. But if the load becomes so heavy that technique collapses, the number may no longer represent meaningful progress toward your actual goal. Imagine performing a curl with a weight so heavy that you must swing your entire body to complete the repetition. You technically moved the weight, but if the goal was to challenge the biceps, did you maximize that stimulus? Probably not. Experienced lifters often look less dramatic than beginners because they understand that the objective is not simply to move weight from one point to another. The objective is to create a specific adaptation. For a strength athlete, moving the load is the performance. For a bodybuilder, stimulating the target musculature may be more important. The standard depends on the goal. Recovery sometimes requires temporarily reducing training stress. This is the concept behind a deload. A deload reduces training demands for a period so accumulated fatigue can dissipate. Not everyone needs a deload on an identical schedule. Some people can train for long periods before needing one, while others accumulate fatigue more quickly. Signs that training stress may be getting too high can include declining performance, persistent soreness, poor sleep, reduced motivation, unusual heaviness during familiar exercises, or irritability. These signs do not automatically mean that someone has a medical condition or formal overtraining syndrome, but they can indicate that fatigue is accumulating faster than recovery. The appropriate response may be a temporary reduction in training volume or intensity. Training is not a contest to see who can accumulate the most fatigue. The goal is adaptation. Eventually, genetics do create boundaries, but most people never reach the limits of their potential. This is important because genetics can become an excuse far too early. If you have trained inconsistently for 6 months, you do not know your genetic potential. If your nutrition is poor, you do not know your genetic potential. If you sleep badly, constantly change your program, and rarely train consistently, you do not know your genetic potential. Potential becomes much easier to evaluate only after years of sustained and intelligent effort. Even then, uncertainty remains. You do not need to prove that you possess extraordinary genetics. You need to build the best physique available to you. Comparison is one of the greatest psychological traps in fitness. There will always be someone with broader shoulders, a smaller waist, longer muscle bellies, faster muscle growth, easier fat loss, better leverage, or faster recovery. If your satisfaction depends on being genetically superior to everyone else, you have created an impossible standard. Instead, compare trajectories. Look at where you were a year ago. Look at your strength. Look at your movement quality. Look at your body composition. Look at your consistency. Look at how you feel. The goal is not to become another person. The goal is to become a stronger, healthier, more capable version of yourself. Age changes the context, but it does not eliminate the value of training. Recovery capacity, lifestyle demands, and physiological characteristics can change throughout life. However, maintaining muscle and strength remains important as people age. Muscle is not simply an aesthetic tissue. It contributes to movement and physical independence. Strength helps you carry objects, climb stairs, stand up, maintain balance, and perform everyday tasks. This is why resistance training should not be viewed solely as a tool for looking good in front of a mirror. It can be a strategy for preserving physical capability across decades. The physique becomes a side effect of function. A strong body can also be a useful body. This brings us to the physique of longevity. It may not be the biggest. It may not be the leanest. It may not have the most dramatic definition, but it is strong, mobile, conditioned, stable, and capable. It can move through different environments without constantly feeling fragile. It can lift, carry, walk, climb, bend, and recover from ordinary physical demands. A combination of resistance training, cardiovascular activity, appropriate nutrition, healthy body composition, mobility, and recovery creates a broad physical foundation. This type of physique may never win a professional bodybuilding competition, but it may be one of the most valuable bodies to carry through decades of life. Extreme physiques are another category altogether. Professional bodybuilding, elite strength sports, high-level endurance competition, and other forms of athletic specialization can produce extraordinary human bodies. But those bodies often require extraordinary specialization. Training demands can become very high. Nutritional demands can become very specific. Lifestyle sacrifices can become substantial. Competitive environments can encourage practices that are not appropriate for the average person. Admiration does not automatically mean imitation. You can appreciate the discipline of an elite athlete without copying every aspect of their lifestyle. For most people, sustainability is more important than extremity. A great physique is one that can coexist with work, family, social life, sleep, responsibilities, and long-term health. There is also a strange psychological experience that comes with changing your body. You see yourself every day, so your brain becomes accustomed to gradual changes. One day, you may look in the mirror and feel as though nothing has happened. Then someone who has not seen you for 6 months tells you that you look completely different. Suddenly, the accumulation becomes visible. This is why photographs can be powerful. They freeze time. They allow you to compare the present with the past. A transformation that felt invisible day to day can become obvious when viewed across months or years. That is the nature of physique development. The process is gradual, but the final difference can be dramatic. The most glamorous concept in fitness is intensity. The least glamorous is consistency. Yet consistency is what produces long-term results. One extraordinary workout is almost irrelevant. 5 years of productive training can transform you. One perfect meal changes little. Thousands of reasonable meals matter. One perfect night of sleep is not enough. A stable sleep routine over years is different. Consistency turns isolated actions into adaptation. This is why the people who make the greatest long-term progress are not always the people who train the hardest. They are often the people who keep showing up, adjust when necessary, recover when needed, and return again and again. Your physique eventually becomes a kind of story. Your shoulders can reflect years of pressing and pulling. Your legs can reflect squats, running, jumping, cycling, or simply a life spent moving. Your back can reveal years of pulling strength. Your body composition can reflect long-term nutritional habits and activity levels. Your posture can reflect movement patterns. But the story is never finished. Every workout adds another sentence. Every meal contributes another line. Every recovery period creates another paragraph. Years create chapters. Eventually, the body becomes a physical record of repeated decisions. This is why the process matters more than the final photograph. The photograph captures the outcome. The process creates it. If aesthetics are your primary goal, begin thinking in terms of visual balance. Look at the body as a whole. Consider shoulder width relative to waist size, chest relative to back, arms relative to torso, upper body relative to legs, front relative to back, and upper legs relative to lower legs. The goal is not necessarily equal size everywhere. The goal is visual harmony. This is why bodybuilding does not simply reward the largest individual muscle. A giant chest cannot completely compensate for severely underdeveloped legs. Huge arms do not automatically create a balanced back. Aesthetic development is about relationships between body parts. One muscle can become more impressive because the surrounding structures are proportionate. As you become more advanced, specialization can become useful. Perhaps your shoulders lag behind. Perhaps your upper chest needs more development. Maybe your hamstrings, calves, or back width are weaknesses. At this point, a priority muscle can receive more attention. It might be trained earlier in a workout, receive additional weekly volume, or be targeted with exercises that suit your anatomy. Other muscles may temporarily receive enough work simply to maintain their development. But specialization is generally more useful when a person already has a strong foundation. When everything is underdeveloped, almost everything benefits from general training. As the physique becomes more developed, the small differences become more important, and targeted specialization becomes more valuable. Technique remains the foundation of all of this. It is not simply about avoiding injury. Technique influences where resistance is experienced and how effectively a movement trains the intended tissues. Small changes in joint position, range of motion, stability, and movement path can change the challenge. This is why recording your lifts can be useful. You may believe your squat technique is identical on every repetition, but video might reveal changes in depth, torso angle, knee position, or balance as fatigue accumulates. Video turns perception into evidence. Evidence allows correction. Correction improves consistency. Consistency improves progression. Eventually, the best lifters stop asking, "What workout should I do?" and start asking, "What adaptation am I trying to create?" That is a major shift in thinking. Instead of copying exercises, they understand principles. Instead of chasing soreness, they track performance. Instead of chasing exhaustion, they manage fatigue. Instead of changing programs every few weeks, they identify variables and make deliberate adjustments. Training becomes a form of problem solving. If strength is rising and recovery is good, continue. If strength is stagnant, but technique is improving, evaluate the situation. If performance is declining and fatigue is increasing, recover. If body weight is not moving during a planned muscle gain phase, adjust energy intake. If weight is dropping too quickly during a fat loss phase, reconsider the deficit. The process becomes analytical rather than emotional. It is equally important to understand what you cannot change. You cannot change your basic bone structure through ordinary training. You cannot relocate muscle insertions. You cannot completely control where your body stores fat. You cannot guarantee that your body will respond to training exactly like another person's body. You cannot force yourself to become genetically identical to someone else. Accepting these limitations is not surrender. It is strategy. Once you stop wasting energy fighting biology, you can focus on using biology intelligently. And the list of things you can influence is actually enormous. You can train consistently. You can progressively overload. You can improve technique. You can consume adequate protein. You can manage energy intake. You can improve cardiovascular fitness. You can improve movement quality. You can develop specific muscle groups. You can sleep better. You can manage your body weight. You can choose which qualities matter most to you. You can remain patient. That is an extraordinary amount of control. Imagine beginning today, not tomorrow, not next month. Today, you enter the gym without trying to become someone else. You look at your body objectively. You identify strengths. You identify weaknesses. You define the outcome you want. Then you build a simple system around it. Resistance training several times per week. A sensible nutritional strategy. Adequate protein. Regular physical activity. Sufficient sleep. Progress tracking. And patience. The first few weeks may not look dramatically different. That is normal. The first few months may reveal more. A year can reveal much more. Several years can reveal a completely different person. The transformation is not magic. It is adaptation, and eventually, we return to the original question. If training builds muscle, why doesn't everyone who trains look the same? Because the human body is not a machine with one fixed output. It is an adaptive biological system. Genetics create differences. Skeletons create different frameworks. Muscle insertions create different shapes. Training creates different adaptations. Nutrition changes body composition. Recovery determines how much adaptation can occur. Lifestyle influences the entire process. And individual goals determine which physical qualities receive the greatest emphasis. There is no single ideal physique. There are many. There is the lean athletic physique, the classic V-taper, the thick and powerful body, the bodybuilder physique, the calisthenics athlete, the endurance athlete, the sprinter, the strength athlete, and the physique built primarily for health, longevity, and confidence. Each tells a different story. Each represents different priorities. Each comes with different trade-offs. And each begins with the same thing: a human body, a starting point, a decision, and enough patience to allow small choices to accumulate. But there is one final idea that matters more than all the others. Your physique is not your worth. A body can be improved without becoming an obsession. You can pursue muscle without believing that muscle makes you superior. You can become leaner without believing that thinness makes you more valuable. You can become stronger without needing to prove yourself to everyone around you. Fitness should expand your life, not consume it. The mirror can provide information, but it should not become your judge. The scale can provide data, but it cannot measure your discipline, character, intelligence, kindness, or potential. A photograph can show your body, but it cannot show your entire story. So build the physique you want. Train intelligently, eat appropriately, recover, progress, adapt. But remember why you started. You are not simply constructing a body. You are developing a physical capacity to live inside that body. A stronger body can carry you farther. A healthier body can give you more options. A capable body can make ordinary life easier. And the discipline required to transform your body can teach you something that extends far beyond the gym. Meaningful change is usually not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is sometimes boring. It is often invisible at first, but it compounds. One workout, one meal, one recovery period, one decision, then another, and another, until one day you look back and realize that the person you were trying to become has already arrived. Not because you defeated genetics, not because you discovered a secret exercise, not because you found a magical supplement, but because you consistently worked with the body you had and built the physique you chose. That is the real power of training. It is not about creating one perfect human body. It is about discovering how much potential can emerge when a unique human body is given the right stimulus, the right resources, and enough time. Different bodies, different genetics, different goals, different physiques. One principle remains the same. Build what matters to you and then give it time.